was one thing, it was really useful. Then the other thing, it was really fun as well. So sometimes at the end of a training day, you might really feel tired, but at this point, I feel I have a lot of new thoughts in my head, or realizations at least. So, and I think that everybody left with a better understanding of the situation when they came in the morning. So it was a really useful day. I think the main message from the day is to have a really good awareness about the situation, about the cultural differences, and also about how important culture is. And for me, what I very much like that you pointed out is that very often the mistake companies make is that they do not prepare their people for those situations. So a local company becomes international and nobody takes care of that side of the business. And if you would really want to know why we decided to have this training in Nelia, then that is exactly one of the reasons. We are moving into a totally different landscape right now. So we have been moving towards that landscape more and more. The cooperation is becoming more intense, and so we thought that there would be so many of our employees who will be working in a multinational environment with Danes and Norwegians and Swedes and Finns. So, and for them to have a really good working experience and to really be able to realize what they are going to do, they need to be aware of what is going to be there culturally. Well, I would say don't assume, and don't assume, because even in our own cultural environment, we very often assume that, well, I assume you have understood what I wanted to achieve, what I wanted to say, the way I'm working. And then even in our own culture, even in our own organization, we can sometimes realize, bloody hell, she didn't understand at all, or we had a different understanding of the agreement that we made, or whatever. So that will be just hundreds of times the more so when we work internationally.
Don't assume.
No, never.
That pleases me, because one of the key messages is don't assume. Don't assume that what is normal for you, your culture, is normal for somebody else. And it's particularly important, I think, with neighbouring countries. Estonia, Sweden, Latvia, Finland, we're all geographically very close. Much shared history, linguistic differences clearly, but there are cultural differences. But they may be more subtle than, say, the differences between an Estonian and Indian or Chinese or Japanese. But those differences are important. You take, for example, communication. For me, as a British person, I find Estonian communication style quite difficult. I think I probably offended a few people today by saying, for me as a Brit, the silence can seem intimidating. Okay, the UK is quite geographically quite far from Estonia, but I talk to Swedish people and others, and for example, they find it pretty intimidating as well. And although for me as a Brit, Swedes seem quite silent, I think Finns and Estonians are even more silent. My interpretation of silence is not positive. I don't think silence is golden. And for me, it's aggressive, it's rude, it feels as though you're not interested. So one of the pieces of advice I was given is please try to respond, ask questions. really know. Even for Swedes, for example, close neighbours, they like a little bit of small talk. They don't want the long kind of stuff on the grip gigs, that's not good, but just a bit more. So adapt your communication style if you're a stone. I think there are other areas that we looked at, like the radical difference between, for example, Sweden and Estonia and Finland on decision making. That the Swedes, very strong cultural wish, whichever company they work for, to seek consensus, ask everybody, what do you think, etc., etc. And I think here in Estonia, probably you take decisions a bit more quickly. And that can cause huge frustration between Estonians and Swedes. So you need to think what tactics to use, what strategies to use in order to, for both sides, Swedish, Estonian in this case, to be able to work better together to make decisions together. I think there are two really, really important key qualities. One is the message that I delivered at the end of the course, that the really successful international managers, the really successful people going out from, in this case, Estonia, are people who are curious, who really want to know about other cultures, how they work. And you use this curiosity in terms of getting business. That when sitting down with other people from other countries, ask them about their culture and the country and the way things work. And they will tell you all sorts of things, which is useful. But moreover, your showing interest in them makes them feel interested in you and develops the relationship. If you sit there and go all Estonian and silent and ask questions, answer questions with yes or no, it just gives a bad impression. So that's the first thing, to really get curious, be curious. The other thing is to deal with the stereotype that the outside world has of Estonia. One of the things we did today was to look at how 26 British business people who I had interviewed at our training centre, how they perceive Estonia and Estonians today. Now, we looked at how you thought the British might perceive Estonians. In fact, you were very good. You have a very good awareness of the fact that, in fact, British people, their first response is, where is it? The Baltic or the Balkans? And is it somehow part of Russia? And I gave the example that when I first came back from Estonia, and my friend said, where have you been? And I said, I've been to Estonia. Estonia. Was it interesting? And I said, yeah. And I started to talk about it. And it sort of came, the look on their faces was, I don't really want an answer to this question. So I said, Skype. And they said, what? I said, Skype. I said, what about Skype? I said, Skype. It's developed by the Estonians. And you could see in front of me, I could see these British people, there's a movement, shift in their perspective. And I think that's what you have to do. Every Estonian going out there has to, in a sense, educate the world. We're not invisible, technically backward, poor country. We are fast developing, successful, technically advanced, probably more technically advanced than you Brits, culture. And those are the kind of people that people want to do business with. So it's kind of two things there. One, be curious. Secondly, sell Estonia. I think do that, and then you're actually helping yourself in terms of building business and developing good relations internationally. So hire me to advise the Estonian diplomatic service. Don't assume it's the one I really...
And be aware of your own stereotypes as well, that you are thinking.
Yeah.
all the Russians are like that, all the Finns are like that. And then when you start to think about yourself, are you like a normal Estonian, the way that others perceive Estonians? Most of us would say, no, I'm not like that. So why do you assume that other nationalities are just everybody just alike? That they actually do have such a very strong cultural identity.
Related to that, one thing that this is not a training that we did, that we do in Canning. It's not do's and don'ts etiquette. Mm-hmm. Frankly, you can go on the net and you can find a huge amount of information about how to behave in the sense of exchanging cards in China, or how to shake hands, or this kind of stuff. It's useful, it's interesting, it's fun, but you can get that for free. But it's also fairly superficial. What you need to understand, anybody working internationally, is why are people behaving in this particular way? What is their normality? Never assume, as you said, absolutely right. And see how your normality, their normality, can be bridged. Do that, and you can be successful working, doing business overseas. You may get all the etiquette right, but if you don't understand why people are behaving in a certain way and how to adapt your communication style, speak more if you're Estonian, speak less if you're British, and changing your behaviour, then you won't succeed. You will succeed if you change, adapt your communication style and behaviour to suit that person's normal way of working. If, for example, you are Estonian working in an international company, the head office of that company is probably in a much bigger country, and you are therefore relatively unimportant in that group's, that company's worldview. You are probably going to have to change more than head office in New York or Stockholm or London or Paris or whatever it is. You have to adapt more. But at the same time, I still think very strongly that you have to educate. You have to explain, say to your Swedish colleagues at head office in Stockholm, look, I understand and we're going to make decisions this way, but please understand our position, our way of doing things. I think that's part of the job. And to go back to what makes for success when operating internationally, you have to have the ability to observe that. You obviously have that skill. You can work successfully internationally.
Thank you.
No, seriously, you can observe that, but that's what you need to be able to do. I will cap your story with another story. That is how I often finish my courses. When as you know, I worked in Japan. I ran our office in Japan. When I first arrived in Japan, I went to visit all our clients with one of the sales staff. We'd just come out of one of the biggest clients, a long meeting, and I turned to Kogure-san, my Japanese salesman. I said, Kogure-san, how was that meeting? We were on the subway back to our office in Tokyo. He said, very good. Now, I've been in Japan just long enough to know that when a Japanese says very good, maybe it's not. So I said, really? Which is good? In Japan, we sometimes say, you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. It took me about 2 seconds to realize, A, that I just had a beautiful example of how a Japanese subordinate will criticize his boss. What had I done in the meeting? I had spoken too much, I had not observed, and I had not listened. The second thing out of that is, I've never forgotten, in my view, that is exactly the kind of behaviour required in any successful international manager. To use your eyes, to observe as you do, to observe that she was thinking, and to listen to what people say, which is definitely an Estonian quality, and to keep this under control. A lot of people think all this cross-cultural training always enriches all soft skills and stuff, particularly technical people, engineers, people like that. But in fact, it's very, very practical. We run an enormous number of international negotiation skills courses. And the key thing when you're negotiating is to try and find out information about the other side. Now, okay, you can go on the net, you can read all sorts of stuff, read annual company reports, you can read articles, do a lot of research and get a lot of factual information. But if you're going to have a successful negotiation with another company, you need to know how the company works, what the organizational culture is, and who's powerful, who's not in the company. Now, how are you going to find out that sort of stuff? If you can sit down with someone from that company, don't ask them about the company. Don't even try, because they'll think, oh, we're always trying to find information. No, that opportunity that you have to have dinner with that prospective client or supplier, sit down and ask them about how things work in their culture. You ask them that question, what are they going to do? They're going to choose examples. They're going to tell stories from their company. Yeah. So suddenly, over a beer, over a glass of wine, over a meal, I'm telling you all sorts of extremely useful information which will help you when you go into that negotiation next day. It's soft, sure, but it's highly relevant and extremely practical. Mm-hmm. If you take that training, frankly, it gives you an edge over everybody else who doesn't take the training. I last week, as you know, I was working in Latvia. This week, I'm working in Estonia, and as a Brit, as we say, a larger, in terms of population, larger country with a very different history, different culture. I really enjoy being in Latvia, being in Estonia with people who, frankly, are far more open-minded, far more curious, far more interested in the outside world than the average British manager. I think that is a real advantage that you have over, for example, British managers. Personally, as a trainer, it's been far more fun. We talk about fun. It's far more fun, if exhausting, training you guys than training British managers. My own culture. Partly for that reason.
Good. Thank you. We are very happy.
Thank you for training.
Okay. You've given me twice as many people tomorrow. Oh, how am I going to cope with that?
You will.